In 1933, Batista led an uprising called the Sergeants' Revolt as part of the coup that overthrew the government of Gerardo Machado. In 1959, Fidel Castro came to power in an armed revolt that overthrew Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista. US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista flees Cuba as Fidel Castro and his revolutionaries gain control and wave at their people. From left to right, Fidel Castro, Osvaldo Dorticos Torrado, Ernesto Che Guevara, Augusto Martinez Sanchez, and Antonio Núñez Jiménez march in Havana, Cuba on March 4, 1960. Castro signs a decree nationalizing American-owned companies in Cuba. U.S. breaks off diplomatic relations with Havana and imposes a trade embargo in response to Castro's reforms. Fidel Castro negotiates a trade agreement with the Soviet Union, allowing Cuba to import Soviet oil. A group of captured Cubans lined up by Castro's soldiers at Playa de Giron, Cuba, on April 1961. They are of the CIA-backed force of Cuban exiles known as Brigade 2506, who attempted invasion at the Bay of Pigs. President John F. Kennedy initiates the CIA's Operation Mongoose, attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's communist regime in Cuba. Operation Mongoose is not successful and pushes Castro closer to the Soviet Union. Castro proclaims Cuba a communist state and begins to ally it with the USSR. The United States discovers Soviet nuclear missiles on Cuba, leading to a showdown with the Soviet Union that almost leads to a nuclear war. The crisis ends with the Russians removing the missiles and the United States agreeing never to invade Cuba and secretly pulling its missiles from Turkey. President John F. Kennedy signs a proclamation for the interdiction of the delivery of offensive weapons to Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba's GDP declined by 33% between 1991 and 1993 due to the crash in sugar prices in the early 1990s. President Bill Clinton signed the Helms-Burton Act into law in 1996. The bill toughened the embargo on Cuba and restricted the president's power to end it. Fidel Castro on the right retires from politics, leaving his brother Raul Castro on the left in power. Obama and Castro exchanged a historic handshake at the funeral of Nelson Mandela. Obama and Castro agreed to improve political, social, and economic relations.